When did your parents' demands go way too far? My father expected me to literally become his identical twin, all because he was so pathetically lonely he needed a clone of himself for company. Dad had driven away every friend and family member with his narcissistic obsession over his own unmatched physical perfection, leaving him completely isolated, except for me. When I turned 10, Dad sat me down with a binder full of photographs showing his face and mannerisms from every angle. "You're going to be my greatest creation," he said, running his fingers through my hair. "Right now, you're just raw material, but I'm going to sculpt you into perfection. We'll be identical twins, best friends forever, and I'll finally have someone who truly understands my brilliance." Then he outlined his transformation plan, and that's when my life turned into a horror movie. I would undergo surgeries to match his exact facial structure, voice coaching to mimic his speech patterns, and behavioral training to copy his mannerisms perfectly. "You'll be me, but younger and more grateful," he explained. "We'll attend parties together and stun the world. Not just one specimen of physical perfection, but two." He stroked my cheek and said, "Imagine if Dr. Frankenstein had created a miracle instead of a monster. That's going to be you, my love." The surgery started when I was 12 with minor adjustments to my nose, ears, and chin. I'd wake up bandaged and swollen while he stood over my hospital bed, comparing my healing face to photographs of himself. "Beautiful work," he'd whisper, touching my stitches. The procedures escalated every few months, with cheekbone implants that left me unable to eat solid food for weeks, jaw reconstruction that made me speak with a lisp, and eye surgeries that left me partially blind for months. Between operations, he'd force me to practice his signature, his laugh, and his gestures for hours while he critiqued my performance. "You're still thinking like yourself instead of like me," he'd scream, slapping me when I got his mannerisms wrong. "I don't want a son. I want a mirror that can talk back and appreciate my greatness." After 3 years of surgeries, I looked disturbingly similar to him, but to his horror, I was still several inches shorter than him. That's when he decided I needed to undergo leg-lengthening surgery, which would involve installing devices that slowly and painfully stretch my legs every day for months. There was a very good chance I'd completely lose the ability to walk, but at least you'll be beautiful, Dad said, booking the surgery. I realized this wasn't something I could bide my time and wait to escape. I had to get out, and I had to do it now. Since I'd learned to mimic his voice perfectly, I called his business associates and confessed to tax evasion, fraud, and child abuse using his exact speech patterns. By morning, the FBI was at our door with arrest warrants, and I was in protective custody while he screamed that I was an ungrateful defective copy who'd never be worthy of his greatness. I thought I'd won, but my nightmare was just beginning. Even from prison, Dad found ways to torture me through lawyers and corrupt officials. He filed custody suits claiming I was mentally unstable from unsuccessful cosmetic procedures and needed his guidance to complete my transformation into a functional human being. He hired investigators to document every way I'd changed since leaving his control, sending me photographs with notes about which surgeries I still needed. I had a good foster family at that point that was opening my eyes to how abnormal my father's behavior was, and that's when I figured out how to beat him once and for all. I would just let him dig his own grave. We went to court, where he was so excited to speak to the judge that he was practically vibrating. He stood up and gave an impassioned speech about his physical perfection and how he'd lived his entire life suffering from the painful ugliness of everyone around him, Your Honor obviously included. He said, "Is it any wonder that I had to replicate myself? Wouldn't anyone who looked like me have done the same?" Just like I predicted, that speech did nothing to win over the judge, who terminated his parental rights and ordered him to pay for reconstructive surgery to undo the damage. Dad was sentenced to 20 years for child abuse and medical fraud. When they dragged Dad out of the courtroom, I heard him sobbing, asking the bailiff, "Does that mean he thinks I'm ugly?" Now I'm 23 and still undergoing surgeries to restore my original appearance, but some changes can never be reversed. I can still mimic his voice perfectly, which haunts me every time I speak, and sometimes I catch myself using his mannerisms without realizing it. The hardest part is looking in mirrors and seeing his face staring back, knowing that even though he's locked away, part of him will always be with me. And if anyone compliments my appearance, I run.